uh, the city commission, the county commission in Gainesville, how much they can't stand me, but I'm their senator. So, again, it's because of you. If they had their way, I wouldn't serve this. I thought I'd do this real quick. I'll go over a couple of the things that happened in session, and then really just open up some questions and let you ask me whatever's on your mind and on your heart. So, the biggest thing that what we have to do constitutionally is we have to pass a budget. A balanced budget. The Constitution does not require a fiscally responsible budget. It just requires that it has to be a balanced budget. Well, when I got up there in 2010, my first year, our state budget was a little over $66 billion. At a deficit, it was down from the year or so before that from about 72 billion. So we'd lost a lot of revenue. I remember getting up there, and as a roofing contractor, my business had gone from 220 employees to about 75 employees in a year and a half. And I was selling trucks and forklifts to make payroll. And I get up to Tallahassee and people are telling me that we have to raise your taxes and my taxes because the state was down. Well, everybody was hurting, and we decided not to do that. And I'm thankful that we had, when Governor Scott came into office and the leadership in the House and the Senate said, no, we're not raising taxes. Matter of fact, what we did is we cut taxes. And we have cut taxes every single year. I remember talking to a retired professor in my second campaign, and I handed him a little flyer and talked about cutting taxes, a couple things down, and talked about funding education. He handed it back to me. He says, you know, you can't do that. You can't cut taxes and have more revenue. We have cut taxes every year. In 10 years, it's about a $10 billion aggregate tax cut. Yet the revenues went from $66 billion to this past budget were over $90 billion. Cutting taxes. To a liberal progressive, that doesn't add up. To people who have common sense of business, if you make the right cuts and you encourage businesses to grow and expand and reinvest their money, then we have additional income, and we had it over $90 billion, by far the largest budget ever. But again, we're doing that by cutting taxes, not by raising taxes. So not only do we have a constitutionally required balanced budget, but we have a fiscally responsible budget. We are ranked #1 in the nation from our tax standpoint and from our budget standpoint. Unfortunately, we're ranked 49th by our tort reform in the legal system. Not a very good for business environment in that regard. And speaking of that, this is probably one of my biggest frustrations that I've had up there, but we don't give up, we continue to fight. And with Bobby Payne back there, let me just take a pause to tell you, Representative Payne, extremely smart, very hard worker, knows how to be involved in the process. You got to get up to Tallahassee, you got to make connections, you got to make relationships, and Bobby's done a great job of that. Represents this area very, very well up in Tallahassee. It's a pleasure to work with you, Representative Payne, so thanks for what you do for our community here too. So two of the biggest things we're dealing with some of the attorneys, we had AOB. I don't know if you're not, I don't want to bore you with a lot of the details on some of these things, but AOB is assignment of benefits. And what it is, it's a process where if you have a claim, your roof leaks, you got a storm comes through, you got some issue, you can have someone come to you, they'll give you a piece of paper, you sign over your policy benefits, and this is what their selling point is, hey, we're going to take care of your issue. We'll deal with the insurance. You don't have to worry about anything. We're professionals doing that. It's a scam, and what they do is they bill the insurance too much money, and they end up having lawsuits. This has been happening with water damages and other things. They moved into windshields several years ago. This is crazy. Last year, windshield damages claims that had a lawyer involved was 26,000 windshield claims in the state of Florida. You need a lawyer if you get a crack in your windshield, don't you? So they've got this market, this scam of how they go about and get people to do it. And what happened was there's a one-way attorney's fee. So if they go to trial or go to court with the insurance companies, and lose, the insurance companies have to pay, and it's a weird mechanism. We got that reversed. That was 7 years. 7 years. Sometimes I wonder if we have a Republican House, Senate, and governor, how it takes 7 years to get some trial attorney reform and tort reform. But we did finally get it done this year. Workman's comp, I'm a roofing contractor. Workman's comp, I think, is one of the biggest issues facing working class people in the state of Florida. So I filed a bill legislation. I worked about 6 weeks, day and night, on this legislation dealing with insurance reform and tort reform. I couldn't get that out of the first committee, not the first committee. And this, I'm going to tell you how this ties into how important elections are. When I first got up there in the Senate, I was in the House. The Senate had a 25 to 15 ratio. Now we have a 23 to 17. So we've lost seats and the Democrats have gained seats. On that first committee, on Insurance and Banking Committee, we have 5 Republicans, 3 Democrats. We had 1 Republican side with the Democrats. That's a 4-4 tie. That means my bill dies. That's how important these races are all over, throughout the state of Florida. But anyway, back to the workman's comp thing, and what I found a little bit frustrating, the trial attorneys have a tremendous amount of power. They give millions and millions of dollars, and they control the Democratic legislators, but they only have to control 1 or 2 Republicans too. And that's how they've managed, especially on the Senate side, control 1 or 2 Republican senators, and then we don't get anything done from reasonable tort reform. We're going to keep working on that, and I told all of them in public at the hearing, I said, don't any of you Democrats go back to your hometown and talk about working class people and the squeezing of the middle class if you refuse to do anything to help them out. And they do. They don't do anything to help working class people out. And we've got to call them out on that, and I did that publicly, and I'll continue to do that and try to put them on the spot when they do these kind of things, because this is important. We can't do that. You can't go back home and talk about, I care about a certain class of people, yet everything you do from a policy standpoint hurts them. And that's what we have happening here. But we're going to keep working. We don't give up. It can be a frustrating process, but we had some gains. So we did that, like I say, with the AOB. I thought that was a big start in that process. School choice. We had a big thing. Y'all read about the new program that we just passed. We have a tax scholarship program in the state of Florida, which if you're in a lower percentile of income, you can get a voucher that says you can go to any school. You can go to a Christian school, you can go to any school you want to go to, and we give that. We expanded that quite a bit this year. We also expanded money in charter schools. Now this is the issue. We can have a debate over whether we want taxpayer money going to a Christian school or not, and I think that's a fair debate to have. I think we win that debate on logic and historically what this country was founded on, but we can have that debate. But the debate when it talks about we are taking money from the public school system is a false debate, and it's untrue, it's disingenuous. Thank you. And I'll tell you real quick on the numbers on that. We have about 355,000 students in charter schools. We have about 100,000 that step up for students or the voucher program. If you look at the combined money, in the public schools, they get about $11,000, just under $11,000 per student, all in state money, local money, and state and federal money. Charter school kids get about $7,700, and step up for students get about $6,600. If you took all of those kids today, the almost, whatever that number is, it's 500-some thousand. If you took those kids today and we got rid of every charter school and every voucher program, and we put those kids in a regular public school, the state would have to come up with about a $1.4 billion more today to fund those at the $11,000 level. And we'd have to build new classrooms, about $1.5 billion that we'd have to come up from a capital campaign to build the classrooms. So when people tell you that we are diverting money from public schools to these Christian schools or to charter schools, that is an outright lie. And I hope that teachers aren't doing that. We don't want teachers teaching kids who don't know how to add math, simple math. This is not a complicated thing to look at the facts of this thing. So the debate there, again, has just been moved and shifted. The other things we can debate on that, on accountability and some of the other things, but certainly not on a financial standpoint. That's pretty black and white, stands out. We had toll roads that we got passed. If you drive around the state of Florida, you're going to find, the interstate. I live right off Interstate 75. That's a very, and I drive, unfortunately, to Tallahassee every weekend. But we need to have some kind of diversion. We haven't had a major road in 55 years since we built the turnpike. And we've grown quite a bit in the last 55 years. And so to get the funding and the studies down to see what are we going to do from a long-term standpoint is a great step in the right direction, and we worked on that this year and got that passed. So and that doesn't mean we're going to build those right away. There's going to be studies, and we're going to be starting that. That process is going to happen to help you and I move freight and people quickly and safely, and that's a fundamental goal, I think, of government. We had sanctuary cities. probably one of the most debated, emotionally debated thing that we did in Tallahassee. We had people protesting. We had people who got arrested. We had people who got kicked out of the Capitol for protesting the wrong way. Protest is fine if you do it in the right way. But that was a really, again, we get these misinformation campaigns. Sanctuary cities simply says that law enforcement is going to work with law enforcement. If there's things that go on, and we have people who are perceived to be potentially criminals, they've been arrested. This isn't people they're jaywalking. These are people who are arrested for a crime, and then we're going to communicate with the federal government to find out if there's issues there. And you think that's anti-immigrant, that's the furthest thing we can do. If you think about immigrants who are trying to flee Honduras and Guatemala, they're doing it because of gang activity. We understand why they would want to do that, but at the same time, we got gang members coming over. And to be able to see who those are, who are the potential criminals out there, then we need to be able to do that. We need to communicate with the federal government. And to have a local police or a local sheriff not do that, it's not a fact. It's in these cities that have adopted some of these programs, it's not the police or the sheriff. It's a city commissioner or county commission telling the police or sheriff you're not going to do it. If you let the police, I told somebody said, why don't we let the police make their own decision? I said I would, but the police aren't the ones making the decision. It's the city commissioners and the county commissioners, and they're saying, police, you're not going to do this. So we passed that bill. Again, it was an emotionally charged bill. We had a lot of people up there protesting and stuff, and I don't mind protest. I don't mind debate. I just like to keep it on factual levels, more common sense. I'm fairly pragmatic when it comes to these things, to look at it. And if you've got good data, good debate, you know, I'm trying to be open-minded on these things. Unfortunately, the other side, a lot of times, don't have the good data or facts. What they do is they just have an emotionally charged kind of issue, and they play it off on that. So, love the governor, except for one bill. So I had a bill, an environmental package bill, does recycling. I also had a part of my bill on the Senate side, put a preemption on cities and counties that they could not ban plastic straws. And the governor just vetoed that bill. So he has a 99% good rating with me, 1% bad right now. You know, he did that. I think he did it for two reasons. Or he said he did. One was he thinks the cities and counties should be able to make their own decisions on issues, and I know there's also a lot of pressure back from environmental groups on that. You know, when you live in Gainesville, I'm the only hope they have sometimes. So city commissioner and county commissioners, and I had a good logic too of why cities and counties shouldn't, on this particular incident, ban plastic straws. But what we get, and I know there's some city commissioners and county commissioners and people got running for that. When the argument is simply home rule, and it says we don't want Tallahassee telling us what to do. My bills that I file, take the straw preemption for example. That is not me telling the city or county what to do. It's telling the city or county what you cannot do. I'm not giving more power to Tallahassee. I'm giving more power back to you and this restaurant owner. That's how I look at those preemption bills. Not to give power to Tallahassee, not to take away from the cities, but to give it back to an individual or a business. And that's this whole rule. And I can tell you what, the same people who cry foul to me about home rule, they blast me all the time. You're taking away our ability. They're the same people who want the federal government to take over the whole entire healthcare system. The same people have the same thing. Give us home rule as the city county commissioner. Don't let Tallahassee do it. Let the federal government take over healthcare. Let the federal government take over banking. Let the federal government take over the whole world. I mean, that's the same people. I don't get that. But again, my bills that I file, when they're preemption bills, when they preempt a city or a county, do not give Tallahassee more power. They give an individual or business more power back to them. And I think that's, if you want to talk about home rule, that's about as fundamental home rule as you can get, is give you as an individual back more ability to do what you want to do. So we've got that. I think we had one other pretty big issue, and that was the constitutional issue on how you get a constitutional amendment on the ballot. There was a lot of pushback in that. I got some mail pieces against me. Pretty simple restrictions, but if you think about this, there's a process to change the Constitution. We can make a referendum that you can vote on. The Constitutional Revision Commission, which I wanted to try to get rid of that this year, to get rid of that commission, or you can have a petition ballot. We're talking about not changing statutes. We're talking about changing the Constitution of the state of Florida. And not to make it impossible, but not to make it easy either. Because what we've seen happen on some of these constitutional revisions is we've seen billionaires come in, hire groups of people from outside the state of Florida, come down, and they get petitions, they put it on there, and then we have people lining up to vote that have no idea what they're voting on. Do you know what that's called? A democracy, which our founding father said is one of the worst forms of government you can have. A democracy, we do not live in a democracy, we live in a constitutional republic, although some of the times the Constitution has been forgotten by some people. We do not live in a democracy. If you don't live in a democracy, you can see that's a failed, that leads to tyranny and anarchy. And so what we've done, and simply the bill that we did was just say we put some restrictions in on how you can collect petitions, and put just some rules in place, not eliminating that. But we made it a little bit where it's a little more rules in how you do that and go about doing that. And again, if you want to have a billionaire, you can have one person like George Soros fund the entire thing to get what he wants on there. We got John Morgan funding the minimum wage right now. And we got one person who's funding this to get that on to change the Constitution, not to change the statute, but to change the Constitution. And that should not be an easy process to do. Unless you want to have a lot of uninformed people making decisions and do that. So we took a lot of heat on that, but we're willing to fight those fights, and I think we had some pretty good victories. Like I say, my straw ban, I'll get over that pretty soon for the governor. And, but I have a good relationship with Governor DeSantis, and I think we're going to have the next few years be doing some good things for the state of Florida. So, but we had a good session. We had a good session for this area. We had a good session for the state. We still got a lot of battles to fight, and I can tell you what, 6,000 people not voting. If you think about the ag race, I was talking to Mr. Brown in there about the ag race, how close that was, and some of these other races. We got to turn out to vote, and we got to make sure that our friends get out to vote. And that means effort. That means action on our part. And if you do that action, there'll be people like me and Representative Payne will go up and we'll fight for you. But we got to get elected to do that. And if you don't get out there and you vote, I know you guys do, but we got a lot of our friends who don't. And we just got to make sure every single election. Everybody says this election is the most important. It is. Every single election is the most important election we have. So, with that, thank you so much for letting me come out and share with you a little bit, and look forward to serving you guys up in Tallahassee the next 3 years. So. Questions?
Darlene, do you have a question?
Yes.
Do I need to say it? No. Okay. I am on one of the state boards that is called the Florida Coordinating Council for the Deaf and the Hard of Hearing. And we hear from constituents when we go for our meetings all over the state of Florida. And in the last couple of years with the hurricane, some of the deaf communities have missed out on being alerted of emergency situations, shelters, and things like that, because those counties did not have sufficient communication, things like interpreters and captioning. So, do you know if that is going to be something that can be certified and qualified in the state of Florida? Right now, the interpreting services are not required to be certified. But for the court, they need to have a certified interpreter, and for medical doctors, they have to for breach of confidentiality. But I was just wondering if there was going to be a way that this service can be required to be certified and all over the state.
Yeah, so the question was about hearing impaired and seeing impaired people who haven't been actively notified of these emergency services. I'm not in that wheelhouse in Tallahassee. I've just seen legislation. I didn't serve on any committees that dealt directly with that. I met you earlier, and I'll be glad to check into that and get with you. I deal with the Able Trust in Tallahassee, which is a big advocate for those things. So I'll be happy to look at that and get back with you here in the next couple of weeks.
All the information I gave you has a lot of information.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sanctuary counties. I was real surprised about a month or so ago where I read Clay County, and I think it was Alachua County, were classified as sanctuary counties. Did I understand you correctly to say there was legislation that forced their hand on that they are not anymore?
Yes, we passed legislation saying that you could not, for city commissioners and county commissioners, to establish policies that would not allow them to communicate with federal agency would be illegal, and you could be fined and stuff on that. So again, it was sounding like we were anti-immigrant, we're going to deport people back. That's just, law and order is what makes this work. And having law enforcement agencies not communicating makes no sense to me anyway. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Talked to you a little bit earlier, rural land program, conservation easement and all of that. Governor Scott, legislation left out there, you spent a lot of money to do a program. This year, we don't have any trying to see it all. Is there any talk about that program within the Senate or even the legislature about helping keep that going? Because there's no money in it this year, it's going to get forgotten next time.
Yeah, and I don't know, Bobby probably knows maybe a little more about that.
Yes, so rural family lands, these grants had no money this year, but I can tell you, part of the problems we had this year is we have such an impact, Hurricane Michael in the Panhandle. Put a lot of additional funds to the Panhandle because of the needs they have there. We've got families abandoning property in the Panhandle. We've got timber down that people had counted on retirement, 600 acres, 700 acres of timber that's blown down in 3 hours. It's not usable. So it was a very difficult year, even though we have a $91.1 billion budget. It was a very difficult year this year to be able to go back and fund some of the rural and family land grant programs. Agricultural component to me is a vital component. I represent rural communities, and so we'll continue to elevate that discussion again next year, John. But I think this year, simply because of the deficit we have in the Panhandle, and the devastation we had there, I think a lot of money was pulled in that direction.
As much as I despise any kind of subsidies, that program, I believe is probably about the best money that the state can spend to be able to conserve this land instead of taking it off the tax roll, putting it out here, the water management's locking it up, we can't get to it. And letting the landowners and the families continue to farm it, be the stewards of the land. It doesn't cost the state anything to do that. They get to maintain it for a long time and still pay taxes on it. I believe that's one of the best programs if they're gonna spend some money on some kind of conservation. I think that really needs to be looked at. I feel for the people out in the Panhandle, I've been out there and I've seen the devastation. We've had some of that here too, and I understand that, but I'd say pull some money out of that stuff that ain't paying for itself to do that.
Florida Forever, Amendment $1 over the years have been questioned. I think it's just a matter of time for those of us who represent rural communities and rural counties and understand the rural family grants and the trust fund, how we need to put that money back there so it goes to conservation easements, rural family land grants, so that it's held in perpetuity, that land is, and we can still farm it and use it. And that's an important issue for us to do.
I hope that doesn't die out. If it doesn't get brought up again next year,
Well, you think that the amount of dollars, $638 million that went into environmental issues this year, I think it was a year of kind of rebalancing from a new governor's perspective and some new administrators and legislators' perspective. But those of us that represent rural areas, farming communities, we will do our best to keep it elevated.
yeah. Well, Governor Scott took a lot out of it, but that's before the hurricanes come.
Right.
He really cut it hard before he left. And then, it didn't get funded at
As
all.
much as he did for us economically, and we supported him very well, the last year was contentious with Governor Scott on a lot of issues.
Don't let it die out. We need that around here.
Sorry, Keith, didn't mean
No,
to-
thank you. Anything else? Last questions? Good. Look forward to getting up there. Next session, we start in September. We do keep an office over here at the government complex. I'm here once every couple of weeks. I have somebody here, so if you need to meet with me, you don't have to drive to Gainesville, but you can call me anytime. But I really need to hear from you. We hear from lobbyists all the time. We hear from administrators. You got issues, you got questions, you have advice, you need to reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about it. Thanks again.